What election did you care the most about and why?
This last one we just had with Biden winning, it was important because people don't understand their rights.
The Trump election, just 2016, just because it was so dramatic, literally a reality TV show.
Yeah, I would say F Boy Island at this point is
You're gonna vote F Boy Island.
well, you could what do you mean?
I mean, I ran for class president in high school, so that was the only campaign that I have been a part of that I cared a lot about.
The Trump-Biden election, definitely in this country, was the most important anywhere. I'm 57. Biggest political events for me before that was probably the fall of the Berlin Wall.
And did you vote in the midterm elections?
No.
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 No, I haven't. I can't say that I've even been up to date politically as to what's happening.
Welcome to the show. I'm Kusha Navidar, filling in for Kai Wright. Democracy. It's a big word. It's heavy, abstract. Even its definition gets debated. But what about the word vote? Now, that is concrete. It's an action, and it's very personal. As you heard, whether it's voting for President of the United States or President of your high school class, everyone's got a story about voting. For me, it goes back to when I became a U.S. citizen. I'm 16 years old in upstate New York at my naturalization ceremony in a room of maybe 8 other people, all older than me. Everyone who speaks during that ceremony congratulates me on becoming a citizen and tells me what a big deal it is that I get to vote. And as a 16-year-old kid, I remember thinking, wow, this is a lot of pressure. I took voting seriously because for me, it wasn't a given. Now, presidential elections were easy, but throw in midterms, special elections, city council, it was hard to keep up. And clearly, I'm not the only one who thinks that. The midterms are fast approaching, and they'll likely receive a fraction of the people who vote in presidential elections. And some would argue that it's the other elections, the smaller ones, that are even more important than the presidential for your local community. So I want to know what gives. There are so many systemic issues that get in the way of increased turnout. But what about the personal obstacles? Can we talk about what makes people excited to vote, and can that inform a way to help us, make voting better? Roxanna Moritz is the former chief election officer in Scott County, Iowa. Not only has she spent a career trying to promote and protect voting, she's also faced a threat of losing her own voting rights because of her work. Roxanna, thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. So let's get started with your own story. You've been in public service for over 20 years. What drew you to focus on voting for your profession?
Well, originally I moved from Florida to Iowa in the early 90s, and I hadn't participated in voting up until that time. But I moved into a community and an area of the city that I moved to that I felt like needed some work. And it appeared to me that it wasn't getting the city's attention that it needed to have. So I got involved. And after 4 years of living there, I ran for city council. I think if you want to affect change, you have to be part of change, and you have to be involved in that process in one way or another. So I lost my first election, but I learned a lot. I stayed involved, and I ran again. And on my second time I won. I served 3 terms on city council. I accomplished what I wanted to accomplish for the community and decided to retire from that position. And then I ran for County Board of Supervisors, and I served a half a term there. And I say a half a term because our commissioner and chief election officer at the time passed away. And from running all those campaigns, I had gotten really involved in how important it was to vote in every election, no matter who you are or who is running, that we each have a voice and each one of our voices really, really matter. So I ran for that position and was elected in 2008, reelected in 2012, reelected in 2016, and then reelected in 2020. And 5 months after being reelected, I chose to leave the position.
And what happened? Why did you choose to leave the position?
To 2020 was a very difficult year for many of us as election officials. We knew it was going to be tough going in 2019 because all presidential elections are very stressful. But then we added COVID to that and all of the things that had to be changed. There was no roadmap to a worldwide pandemic. We were all doing just what we needed to do to make sure that we ensured that we had a fair and honest election, that people saw that it was a good election. And I left because there just seemed to me to be a partisan divide. And I think I started seeing it around 2008, where it was no longer just what was best for the citizens in the community. There was a definite division of each party. And I really didn't feel like I had the support of both parties. My board of supervisors was dominated by Republicans. I missed a code section, one sentence that said I didn't have the authority to pay hazard pay to my poll workers. And because of that, the board wasn't sure what I had done illegally, but there was a lot of chatter. And of course, social media plays a role in it. And I'm still under investigation right now from the state auditor, whether I did anything wrong or not.
So you missed one sentence and that caused a lot of backlash, it sounds like. What was that experience like for you after having been in the position since you said 2008, right?
Right. I still experience anxiety over it. During COVID and all of the national media attention that was happening in 2020, we were just trying to move as quickly as we could to get all the safety things in place for COVID, for the primary election. I missed it in the primary, not in the general. So we are going into COVID where we're about 60 days in, and I missed the code section. I felt like people should be paid if they felt like coming to work, being part of the process and being at risk of getting COVID. And so the new law changed, which was Senate File 413, which makes it that there's an opportunity for you to be charged with a felony and fined up to $10,000 for misconduct if you at the discretion, I guess, of the Secretary of State.
Yeah. And so you were exposed to that and you decided, pack up my bags 2008 to, you said 2020, time to go to New Horizons, I guess, right?
Right. It's not only a felony, I lose my right to vote if you're charged with a felony. So I think, we all take those things very seriously. And I see that around the country is that you're losing the institutional knowledge that's been in place because of the threats and the underlying bullying that goes on with the partisanship in the elections field. Most chief election officials just want to do their job. They just want to put on a good election, make sure everybody that has a legal right to vote, like you being a citizen, has the right to come out and express their voice, use their voice to make a difference in democracy.
So let's talk about that partisan divide that you're talking about. Maybe zoom out a little bit. With that 2 decades of experience you've got, do you think anything's changed about the spirit of voting, especially when it comes to less publicized elections like the midterms during the time that you've served?
I do. I think as you so slowly seen that shift of the partisanship, that people just really feel like their voice does not matter. I lived in a county where our congressional district in 2020 was the closest of any election in 100 years. It matters. Every single vote matters, no matter what election it is. Every voice needs to come to the ballot box.
Can we dig into that a little bit for a second, though? Sorry to interrupt you. It's just, I hear from so many people. I hear from friends, for instance, they say, my vote doesn't matter. Now, in the abstract, it's hard to feel like when you put your ballot in the ballot box that it's going to move the needle. So when somebody says something like that to you, my vote doesn't matter, what do you say back to them?
I tell them that my husband won by 5 votes in his first city election. So his first term on city council, he won by 5 votes. Rita Hart's election was less than 100 votes. It is very important that even if you feel it doesn't change the needle, that you're part of democracy, that you take that issue to heart and to mind, that we live in a country that gives us fair representation. Like you said, when you became a citizen, it was a huge issue for you that you were going to be able to actually participate in your governance, in your democracy. And that comes through your voice and it comes through your vote when you go to vote, whether that's a city election, a school election, a midterm election, or presidential election. every one of those elections matter.
And there's, a certain amount of irony in the sense that if your concern is how much impact a single vote has, it's actually often the smaller elections where your vote could go further. So what do you think are the biggest challenges that get in the way of participation in these smaller elections, either systemic or individual motivation?
I think there's just not enough education. And I know that's a hard thing to wrap around because we always say just go educate the voter. But because in your large elections, like your presidential election, then down to your midterm elections, you see national news, you see radio have ads for the campaigns, you see campaign workers out knocking. And in your smaller elections, you just don't have the dollars that are spent that you see in the bigger elections. And so you don't have the publicity for people to know what's going on. And we all live very, very busy lives. No one knows what someone else's life pattern is. Is that someone working 2 jobs who doesn't have time to invest to find out? Is that someone who can't get to the bus during the day to get to a polling location? So we really have to challenge ourselves to make sure that we reach out to people in a way that we can educate them on all elections. So I am a strong proponent of what I call Auditor on the Road show. Let's go out in every election and let's share with people the election equipment that we use, the processes that we use to educate them and empower them to want to go vote.
And when you think about folks that don't have that office, what could they do as individuals to move the needle? Is there anything besides education? Because I feel like that's the answer I always hear. Is there something else that you've seen that works?
Get involved. Be a poll worker. Work for the county commissioner in an election. Get invested. Share your stories about when you went to vote, whether they're good or they're bad, whether you feel like you made a difference or not, but stay involved. We need to work with our high school students. We need to work with our college students. And I'm not sure if I heard this in your intro, but when I was raised, I went to the polls with my parents. And so it was a generational thing where we were taught the importance of voting. And so you got that when you became a citizen. Are we culturally teaching our children the importance of their voice and their vote?
And you feel like that doesn't happen as much anymore, or it's just different?
I don't think it happens as much. I think people live very, very busy lives. They're not engaged because we can see that by the voting patterns of who votes. And so I think we need to make sure that we're teaching our children what that democracy really means, what people have fought for this country, for us to have the right to go to the ballot box.
Yeah, let's pause it there. I'm talking with Roxanna Moritz, who's the former chief election officer from Scott County, Iowa. We'll take a break, and when we come back, we're going to hear from people around the country about what got them excited to vote, whether it was in a political race or, get this, naming parts of Pluto. Now, that part gets me really excited. I'm talking with Roxanna Moritz, and we'll be right back.
Hi, my name is Echo and I live in Austin, Texas.
My name's Andrew.
This is Claire from Milwaukee.
The last time I was really excited to vote was in the 2016 presidential primary. I had turned 18 a couple weeks before. Bernie Sanders represented my views more than anyone else I'd seen in major politics. I haven't been excited to vote since, largely because it just doesn't feel like it makes a big difference when Democrats do win.
My first election I was able to vote in was the 2016 presidential election, but the election I was most excited to vote in was my senior year of college. I was part of a sorority, and I remember the last election for the executive board feeling so important because I felt could have made or broken the success of the sorority for the next year.
I'd like to start off by saying I voted in every U.S. election since I've been able to. That said, the most important election for me was the naming of features on Pluto and its moon Charon, supported by NASA and the International Astronomical Union in anticipation of New Horizons flyby on July 14th, 2015. I lobbied really hard to get features named after creations by satire legend Terry Pratchett. It was really important to me because space, Pluto, and Sir Terry Pratchett are all magnificent beyond description.
The time I was most excited to vote was my first presidential election in 1992. My sisters and I had turned 18. We were all in college at different universities. We came together for a weekend visit, and we had our absentee ballots retrieved from our parents' house. I remember us sitting on my older sister's dorm room floor, punching our ballots. To me, this was something great. We were adults now, making some difference in the world.
Welcome back. I'm Kusha Navidar. Now, the voices you just heard were messages we received from around the country. We asked people to send us stories about what election got them most excited to vote, both political and non-political elections. Thanks to everyone who submitted a story. So I'm joined by Roxanna Moritz, former auditor and commissioner of elections in Scott County, Iowa. And Roxanna, listening to those messages, were there any themes that stuck out to you?
There were. So too, as I previously said, the last one where they said they all came together as a family and as sisters and they felt like adults was a generational thing. So they had been taught or they felt the importance growing up of like, oh my gosh, when I turn this age, I'm going to be an adult because I'm going to get to vote. Kind of like what you said in your intro. And the other ones were like, they were passionate about something that they wanted to see change in, and they followed through and were motivated to go and vote. The one that saddens me the most of all three was the first one, who voted and then felt disenfranchised because her candidate did not win. And we don't always win in elections. It's you have to take it for what it is, stay involved, and if you want to see change, make a difference by keeping to your values of voting and going to the ballot box and hoping and working for those campaigns. So I was saddened to hear she felt disenfranchised.
I hear that, yeah. And another thing that stuck out to me, especially that you mentioned, was the excitement, that kind of, I have a personal stake in this. And to me, it just makes me wonder, is there anything we can take away about that element of it to address in elections that are local, where you know, I saying excitement about city council, a lot of people are excited, but a lot of people aren't. Is there something we can do there, or is there anything that you've seen that, you know, bucks the system in that sense?
Well, I'm always in every interview I always do, and especially the presidentials that I've done in the past, I always say it, I'm always enamored by the fact that people are not that enthused by their city elections or their school board elections, because that is where they can make the most difference. That's where they can actually touch somebody. They can go to their office, they can have input, they can go to the meetings, they can speak. And that's where their dollars go, and they can see that budget. And I'm always just taken back by the fact that they don't feel like they have impact there, but they do in a presidential election. So I just think it really is a motivational challenge for us. And I know this is the word you hate, education.
Oh, I love education, just for the record. Okay. But yeah, I hear you.
A way of looking at how we can look at this outside of the box of just what that word is in education. What does that mean? What are the tentacles to that? How can we deliver that to our younger generations in a way that becomes accepting to them, to where you get to where the sisters sat around the table and had their absentee ballots and were so excited to be adults. How do we challenge ourselves to look outside of that arena and how to bring that to the younger individuals?
Yeah, I hear that. It's reframing and re-injecting the spirit, I guess is what I hear you say. Let's pause there for a second and bring back Roxanna in a second. But to get voices from all around the country, I'd like to bring on somebody else. We partnered with station KUOW in the Seattle area to ask for stories from their community. And I'm really excited about this because it's the first time I think the show's tried that. So we're joined now by Zeki Hamid, Director of Community Engagement for KUOW. Hi, Zeki.
Hey, Kusha, how you doing? Thanks for having me on.
Oh, totally. I'm so happy to have you here. So you used text messages to talk to your community. Walk me through that a little bit. What did you do and what did you find out?
Sure. So we have a club called the Community Feedback Club, and people opt into this. And when they do, we send them about 1 or 2 texts per week asking for feedback on or story ideas. So we sent out a text and we're saying, hey, we're partnering with this great show in New York. And we asked them a question: what election did you care about the most and why? And we said any kind of election, political or not. So one of the cool things that's popped up was that systems was really top of mind for the people that wrote in. And specifically 3 things I want to point out. One was people talked about vote by mail. People feel really protective of that system. We have a vote by mail system here in Washington State. We've had it for many years, but I think people feel protective of that system, especially because vote by mail came under some scrutiny by some, especially by some in the GOP in the 2020 election. So I'll give you an example. Lisa wrote and said, I care very much about all elections, local, state, and national. I guess I have the most fear and concern around national elections because of voting systems in other states that suppress votes and are open to manipulation. I think Washington's mail-in voting is very secure, and we've had good election laws that are fairly enforced. So that was a pretty cool example there about that system. Mm-hmm. And we got several messages about 2 other systems, approval voting and ranked choice voting. And that kind of makes sense because here in Seattle in this November, voters will be able to choose if they want to adopt ranked choice voting or approval voting. Both electoral models allow voters to pick multiple candidates. But as you probably know, because I know you have this in New York, ranked choice allows voters to rank their candidates by preference, while approval voting tabulates all of the votes evenly. And if either is passed, it will go into effect in Seattle for city attorney, mayor, and city council elections.
And let me just pause you here for a second, because since we're talking about ranked choice voting, I just want to shout out Bridget Bergen, who's WNYC's City Hall and politics reporter, who has done a lot of work to cover and explain this arena. So if you're listening and you want to find out more about what ranked choice voting is, you can go to our website, wnyc.org, and search for that term, ranked choice voting, and read up on a lot of her coverage. So sorry to interrupt you, Zeki.
No worries.
Please keep going. What else did you see?
I'm going to give you a couple of examples here of people texted in about those 2 systems that we just mentioned. Dan wrote in and says, I hope ranked choice voting and approval voting can take prominent roles in these discussions. I think ranked choice voting is an important step we can take to allow voters, to allow voter wills to be better represented and push against polarization. And one more I want to mention here, I think this is pretty cool. Anne wrote in saying, my most personally rewarding elections have come from the adoption of ranked choice voting in both my reading group and my charitable giving group. Ranked choice voting is a method that means if your first choice doesn't win, your second favorite could. So our votes continue to count and a significant degree of satisfaction remains. Civility reigns and partisan misbehavior declines. Just ask Alaskans. So I thought that was pretty cool that she adopted that in something that is more personal to her, which is her reading group and charitable giving group.
So Seattle likes systems, I guess.
Yes.
Is that, yeah? And can you tell me a little bit about that? What's unique about the Seattle community in the responses that you got?
You know, they're very engaged. Seattle is a really engaged group. Our voting percentages are pretty high. And I think a lot of them are engaged and looking for ways to continue to make voting more fair and to make it really accessible. We've had a great Secretary of State, Kim Wyman, who was a Republican but had left now the office and Steve Hobbs have taken over. But she is incredibly passionate about making sure that our voting systems are fair and just make it really accessible to everybody. So I think Seattleites really care about that.
Yeah, and I want to give a shout out to everybody in the Seattle area that helped Zeki out with this and brought us their insights. It's really special to have it. And Zeki, before we let you go, and thank you so much for partnering with us on this, can you tell me a little bit about your own voting story?
Oh, sure. So I just a little bit of background. I came to the States in 94. I'm an immigrant. I'm Palestinian, but I was born and raised in Jordan. And I got my citizenship in July of 2001. And I was really excited to finally be registered to vote. I was registered to vote in New York. But by the time the 2002 midterm elections came, I was in Delaware. And I missed the deadline for requesting an absentee ballot, so I couldn't vote in 2002, and that just really weighed on me. But by 2004, I was now in Seattle, and the first time I got to vote was in February of 2004, and it was a special election. There's only one thing on the ballot, which was a school levy. A foregone conclusion, because here in Seattle, we love school levies and we always overwhelmingly approve them. And only about 30% or so of eligible voters actually ended up voting in that election, or I think in registered voters. But I just was so incredibly happy. And back then we had to go into a booth. So I did manage to experience of going to booth and pulling, and just voting for that levy. That just meant the world to me. It was the first time I was ever able to vote in anything in my life. And to experience democracy like that, it was addictive. I've never missed a single election since.
Oh, wow. Started with school levies and it just grew from there. I love it.
Yeah, exactly.
Zeki Hamid is Director of Community Engagement for KUOW. Thanks so much, Zeki.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, Roxanna, I want to turn it back to you. In a lot of Zeki's what he got from his community, I heard this focus on systems, and it's interesting because it feels like there's a tension between whether the idea of voting itself should change with how we consider votes to be tabulated. For me, it's kind of like a constitutional argument, almost like originalist versus living and evolving. What do you think about that, especially as new systems and options, ranked choice voting, for instance, come up? What does that resonate for you?
Well, first I have to say to Zeki, I have chills when he talked about like what that meant to him to vote. He took it so seriously, and he felt bad when he wasn't able to vote in the first election. So, I wish that every single individual felt and experienced what you and he both have done and felt. Ranked choice vote, I'm really not familiar enough with it, but with systems, everything he said about his texts about vote by mail and how protective Washington is about that is the opposite for some of us in the Midwest who use election equipment. Not me specifically, but people challenge the thought of how safe vote by mail is, much like how they probably feel how safe our equipment is, right? Mm-hmm. And so vote by mail would definitely encourage more people to vote. If we can't get vote by mail, we had three auditors in the primary election in 2020 mail out absentee ballots to every single registered voter. And they were sued. And they lost because there was a law in Iowa that says you can't do that. But many states are trending towards making it less available to get to the ballot box. It's less days to get an early vote. So while I would love to see vote by mail like Zeki has in Washington, our legislators are taking us clear to the other side of the spectrum. Less days, more restrictions, harder to vote, making it harder for individuals to get out to vote. So I think the challenge is how do we get them back to the other side to see the importance of every single vote matters.
And so with those challenges coming up and after all you've been through and seen, do you get discouraged?
I get discouraged in the fact that our legislators don't understand the importance of every single vote, whether that's a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent. We all have the right to voice our concerns at the ballot box. And the most important thing is to understand, much like what Zeki and you were saying, we live in a different environment now. If everyone was mailed a ballot and they could sit at home and they could take time to research who they were voting for and mail it back, we might have more of an engagement across the United States for every election. But we seem to want to scrutinize. And while that's a very progressive state, Colorado is, California, where you have vote by mail, we don't seem to be in the rest of the country moving towards making it more available. Mm-hmm. We seem to see those other states that are making it more restrictive. Iowa was the first one to pass the less days for absentee and the penalties for elections officers. So in Iowa, we have absentees, but we went from 40 days to 29 days to now 20 days. And if we have UOCAVA votes, which are votes for military people overseas, if our ballot has to be ready 45 days ahead of time for those individuals, I think we should make that available for all of our citizens in our counties, in our states, so that they can vote early.
And so let's wrap this up then. If you had to think about one takeaway that you want folks listening to have about what it would take to increase voter turnout, what would you say to them?
Absolutely, their voice and their vote matter, no matter what election it is. Get involved, lead by example, go to the ballot, put your voice out to action, make it happen.
That's wonderful. And if you get the response of, yes, but it just takes up too much time, I've got too many things in my life, what would you say to that person?
Your life is dictated by the votes that those individuals are going to make. So it's very important that you understand that every single office that there is, whether it's school board or city council, they're affecting your life in one way or another. And it matters how you are voting, how they're governing. And that's the true sense of democracy. One vote for fair representation.
And one last one for you. Why is it so important that people vote in every election, even the smaller ones?
I say, a lot of that is the commitment of those people to put themselves out there and even run. Support them for wanting to step up. And, school board especially, I don't know in other states, but in Iowa, they don't get paid and they put lots of hours and time in to ensure that our children have the policies and procedures in place. And so, understand those people are out there working on your behalf, whether you support what they're doing or you don't. Stay involved.
And can you tell us a little bit about how you stay involved right now?
I'm running, I don't live in Scott County anymore. I'm a couple counties over, but I'm running a statewide Senate campaign.
Oh, wow. And are you being able to translate what you've learned about voting through that position of what you're working on right now?
Oh, absolutely, because there's so much information out there. And much like what Zeki used with his text messaging, there's a lot of opportunities to use technology to benefit us all through the election process. Even if your commissioners of elections were able to send out a text to everybody letting them know where their absentee voting sites are.
Got it. Roxanna Moritz is the former chief election officer from Scott County, Iowa. She spent more than 2 decades in public service. Roxanna, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Absolutely. So coming up, we go from new ways of voting to new ways of remembering our past. Hear the story of one artist in New York City who uses digital technology to tell his story and what it has to do with September 11th. This is a special segment, so please do stay with us. Welcome back. Lately, we've been talking a lot about how digital technology influences the way we live, and we found people using it in a lot of interesting ways. In fact, last year, an organization called 9/11 Day commemorated the anniversary with, get this, NFTs. Those are basically digital assets. An auction of the digital art supported the efforts to make September 11th a national day of service. I met up with Vlad and James Nazarov.
Hey! Hi. I'm Kusha.
Two of the artists who contributed and who are also father and son.
Thanks for inviting us in here.
Our pleasure. Come on in.
We're in Vlad's studio, right underneath the Brooklyn Bridge. You can feel the rumble of the trains passing by. Imagine 20-foot tall ceilings and bright studio lights. Paintings are everywhere, some of them more than 15 feet long, stacked on top of each other along the walls. James walks us through it.
This piece is from his series called The Pop Mona Lisa. When you see the face in total, you don't know, is she happy, angry, sad? And it's combined with his heart patterns, which is one of the styles that he's known for.
Over his lifetime, he's experimented with lots of different styles, and he'll use whatever he can get his hands on.
Wood, metal, stone, acrylic, oil, air conditioning parts.
Old toilets. Toilet chain?
Yeah, oh,
used to
right.
This piece is called the Faithful Feed the Flame.
Imagine a tall canvas in brilliant red, covered by triangles outlined in black, with blue, yellow, and orange dots all over.
It is also a blockchain-inspired piece, and it's that concept of being first to a concept, and it's that type of faith that keeps a flame going. So
this is a physical piece that Vlad turned into a digital NFT asset.
And you can see a little bit in the geometric abstraction here. You get a little bit of a diamond shape there. Is that an on-the-nose Ethereum diamond, perhaps? Who knows?
It's expression and to present your art in a different way. You can play with colors, you can play with movement, and I can see so many opportunities, and it's give artists freedom, it's give to artists can create something what he never was able to create before.
I wanted to know why it was so important to Vlad and James and how they ended up using these NFTs to support a 9/11 organization. To do that, I had to start at the beginning of Vlad's entry into New York City.
I'm a refugee from former Soviet Union, Odessa, Ukraine. No freedom for artists to do anything. I just have to follow what government tell you to do.
And so, 40 years ago, at the age of 24, Vlad found his way to Brooklyn. He started making art while working at other jobs, a women's clothing designer, an engineer, and more. Eventually, he had children. His son, James, helped him with his art and helped him see the opportunity in NFTs.
Yeah, we were exploring it early on.
And so for a lot of folks listening, they might have heard of NFTs, but they might not be able to point and say, hey, that's an NFT. Maybe explain from your perspective what an NFT is.
Okay, well, so NFT, non-fungible token. NFTs I feel like they get confused as art itself. This NFT boom that we've had recently. People think NFTs, they think, like a picture that people are trading for obscene amounts of money. NFTs, it's an authentication mechanism.
It's like a certificate.
It's just a certificate, right? There are certificates of authenticity most of the time. If you're buying from a gallery, sure, something that a seller would put together to make a buyer feel more comfortable about the work that they're purchasing. That this is an authentic piece because this is where it started, and this is how it got to me.
So is it fair to say that the NFT for your purposes is making sure what a person buys from you is authentic, but instead of it being tied to the physical world, now it's digital, and that opens up a lot of opportunities for you for new ways to connect with folks?
Absolutely. And it's a complete game changer because there's a lot of gatekeeping in the art world. So you may not have access to all of the transactional information. You may have to request that information. You might have to ask people for it. With an NFT, boom.
And in the case of Vlad and James, here's what working with NFTs looks like. Imagine a digital picture of a physical piece Vlad has actually painted. That digital picture could be static or animated like a GIF. You can go visit a website, and just like you'd peruse an art gallery and look at one-of-a-kind paintings, you can peruse the site and these unique digital files. If you decide to buy one, you get an NFT. It's basically the deed to that file. It replaces the physical certificate of authenticity. To honor September 11th, Vlad and James painted a landscape of New York City. Then they created a digital version of the painting along with an animation of it getting painted and bundled those digital files with a single NFT.
Vlad, why did you feel moved to make a piece about 9/11, commemorating it?
New York City is very important for me, and attack on New York really hurt me so much that I'm always thinking about how to create something to show to the world in a piece of art how important New York City, how important freedom, what we have here, to show to future generation this tragedy.
It's and a little bit of like a story point as to why this day had a personal effect on the family. Was so my sister, his daughter, was supposed to actually be at the towers that day. So there was clients that we had in the building, and she was supposed to go to a meeting. And I guess just, thank God, thank the universe, it wasn't her fate to be there that day. She was late. She's never late. She's not late to anything. She's just a punctual person, responsible, always on time. And it's just one of the few times in her life she was late, and it saved her life.
This was really difficult for Vlad to talk about because Tanya, his daughter from that story, and James's sister recently passed away. The idea that art could be a time capsule for these memories felt really relevant in a way I didn't expect.
And it's just it's just something to you think about destiny, fate, and luck, and how it just plays off in life. And there's certainly a lot of exploration of that in his work in general.
Yeah, a lot of universal forces, I guess. Do you think that's fair to say, Vlad, in your work? And so, tell me a little bit about how you participated in this auction. What was your role in it? What did you do?
I create paintings, I create NFT, and I want to help organization who promote memory of 9/11 event.
And this was the 9/11 Day organization. So we were reached out to, and it was a way to give back and not just create one single physical work, which he did, but he was then able to turn it into different NFT editions. So it goes into the multiple lives that a single work could have.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. Was there anything special about working with NFTs that helped commemorate the anniversary in a way that wouldn't have been possible otherwise?
I think that the ability for him to digitize the work and to turn it into different movements, into different themes, and tell different stories. It's all one unique story of remembering this tragedy, to unite and to tell that in different ways. So he was able to create the one work which he used the country's colors of red, white, and blue, sort of commemorate. It wasn't just New York's tragedy, it was, in a way, a country's tragedy, and commemorate that all with those colors, and then at the same time tell the sort of New York story that he experienced in different color schemes. Because that's what we are. We are this mix of color, of energy, of life, and he wanted to show that in different works.
So it was like you took the same picture, and because it was digital, you could adjust it in different ways?
We can adjust it in different ways.
Different hues, you're saying? Or
Yep.
And when you say movement, what do you mean by that?
You can, in NFT, you can create movement.
Like a literal animation.
Yeah, a real animation.
So we were taking snapshots of him working on the piece over time. So it starts as just the background of the city with the towers, and as it goes on, we have different layers of lines and more lines, then dots, and we wanted to show that transition because it's the growth. It's how the city has grown over time, how Vlad has grown within the city over time, and then how that art piece has grown also.
Do you know who got the NFT that you put up for auction?
No.
Have you ever been interested in trying to find out, or can you even find that out?
No, we can't. That's the most amazing thing about NFTs and blockchain is we have this ability to interact with each other. And we never have to know, I guess for better or worse, who we're interacting with. And I think draws us to, the term is trustless, which is really, really, really interesting because we think of trust as something positive, and it is, but it's almost like trust is grown from a negative concept that these outward forces want to hurt you, whether it's people or something. So you have to build trust. It doesn't just come out of nowhere. So it takes time to build it. Whereas trustless sounds negative from the way we understand it, but it's actually a very, I guess the word maybe is positive, because we don't need trust to interact on the blockchain. We don't need trust to send an NFT. We don't need to know who the people are. It's a mathematical protocol. These new concepts come around and really just changes the way that, not just the way that you conduct yourself in the world, but just the way that you even view the world.
You know, I wanted to touch on that, how you view the world, because NFTs in general feel like they hold opportunity, but it's hard to see how much of it is real and how much of it isn't. Do you feel like NFTs make the art world more fair?
Yes.
In the art industry, there are a lot of gatekeepers. It's a small, relatively small group that decides what is art when you think about that. And art is almost everything. Like, it's actually very difficult to define, but there are a small group of people that define what art is. And when you have art that now can be forever sort of cemented within this network, it becomes something then that's just hard to change.
So what about folks that don't have a seat at the table, or like don't have the easy access to getting their art out in the world?
It's NFT.
Why?
More people can see my art.
I think there also would have been just the benefit of any of the art that would have been traded or changed hands over that time. Theoretically, there could have been also some sort of royalty coming back to Vlad from those transactions.
When James talks about royalties, he means that if an NFT is sold a second or third time down the road, it's possible to track that sale back to the original creator so they could get some of the proceeds. It seemed like this technology did present benefits to creators. But frankly, I'm still suspicious of the idea that NFTs could bring more equity for underrepresented artists. There are risks. James recognized that too.
NFTs non-fungible tokens will be a part of our lives in almost every single way. Think of identification cards, ticketing, insurance. Everything will be attached to an NFT.
Because it's just the certificate. Right?
It's just a certificate.
But does any of that give you pause?
Yes, for sure. So it's utopia, dystopia. Sure. It's definitely a mix there.
For James, a lot of the concerns that exist in the art world also extend to NFTs, money laundering, speculation, scams. And in general, this is really new territory, so it's dangerous to start using the technology without real education.
And I think that we're going to be spending the next decade figuring that out.
As I listen to Vlad and James, it's hard to miss the history in the room. 40 years ago, an artist found refuge in New York City. 21 years ago, that city faced a horrific attack. Now, that artist and his son are trying to honor that memory through their work. And I want to know, what impact do they hope to have?
People will remember this event.
The way I view it is the importance of self-reflection. So it's a lot of people often ask, what does the artwork mean? And we can describe what the artist was feeling, but I think the real interest comes from what does it mean to you, or what does it mean for the viewer? So this is a profound moment in history, a tragic moment in history, and we can see, the artist trying to capture that tragedy, capturing the hope that he has in tomorrow, and in the hope that there is more peace on the horizon. But we hope that there's a healing aspect to the work, that people can look at it. Hopefully they can have that conversation with themselves.
Yeah. And what do you hope this technology, NFTs, does one way or another towards that goal?
That it allows people to reflect on art, to own art, and to share it without the worry that there are some sort of outside parties that are going to manipulate or get involved in that experience. So we hope that with NFTs that there's a way to just preserve art and sort of preserve its history for people.
Yeah. Let's leave it there. Thank you both so much for the work that you're doing and for inviting us into your studio and for being a part of the city and making the art and working with new ways of getting it out to people.
A real pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for stopping by.
A very special thanks to Vlad, James, and the entire Nazarov family for sharing their studio, their story, and this city with us. If you're more curious about NFTs, we'll be hosting an event in partnership with the Green Space, New York Public Radio's performing arts space. It's called De-Riddling NFTs, and it's happening Wednesday, September 14th at 7 p.m. We'll leave a link in our show notes. The United States of Anxiety is a production of WNYC Studios. Our theme music was written by Hannes Brown and performed by the Outerborough Brass Band. Mixing by Jared Paul. Milton Ruiz was on the boards for the live show. Our team also includes Emily Botine, Regina DeHeer, Karen Frillman, Rahima Nassa, and Kai Wright. And I'm Kushan Avidar. As always, I hope you'll join us for the live version of the show next Sunday at 6 p.m. Eastern. Kai will be back with a special announcement we're all really excited about. You'll definitely want to take note. Until then, thanks for listening. Take care of yourselves and each other.